Okay, welcome to RHCSA, Red Hat Certified System Administrator. This is an entry-level course from the Red Hat platform. In this RHCSA, we are completely going to learn about RHU, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Okay. Okay, we'll talk about the Red Hat Enterprise Linux. What is Red Hat Enterprise Linux? Why we want the Red Hat Enterprise Linux? Okay, what is the advantage using the Red Hat Enterprise Linux? We'll talk about it later. Before that, let's try to understand what is Linux and why we want to use Linux. Because in the market, you have the various operating systems, right? When you go with the market, you have the Red Hat Enterprise Linux, you have the Ubuntu, you have the Windows operating system, right? You have the Mac, you have the various distributions from the IBM, or you have the Solaris. In these all the operating systems, why we want to use the Linux? Okay, why we want to use the Linux? If somebody asks you what is the definition of Linux, then what you could say? What is the meaning of Linux?
It is an OS.
Okay, okay, we can modify. Linux is an open source operating system. This is the simple definition of Linux. Linux is an open source operating system. If you see this definition, we can break down this. The very first one, we should know what is an operating system. Okay, we should aware about what is an operating system, because everywhere we are having the operating systems. In your desktops, in your laptops, in your servers, mobile devices. Everywhere we are having the operating systems. So first we should know what is an operating system and how this operating system helps the users to control his systems. And the second one is Linux. What is Linux? Why we want to use this Linux? And finally, open source. What is an open source? Okay. And what is the advantage with the open source? Because while you are talking about the other operating systems like Windows and the Mac, we are not using this term open source. But when it comes to the Linux, here we are using the term open source. How it is an open source? These are the 3 points we're going to discuss here. Okay, so what is the first one? Operating system. What is an operating system? What
It
is operating system?
manages the hardware and
An operating system.
it's a platform that manages the hardware and interface between user and system.
Yeah. An operating system is a software. It's a software. It's an interface between user and computer hardware. Computer hardware. This is the official textbook definition of your operating system. But how this operating system will help the users? Okay, how these operating systems will help the users? Let's say you are inside the Chrome. You are searching something LinkedIn.com. You want to log into the LinkedIn.com. Simply, I am searching LinkedIn.com. As a user, you are passing all your inputs in a human readable format. This is the human readable format, right? But your system could not understand what is this form. Your system don't know what is this N, what is this I, what is this L. Your systems can understand only the binary language. Only the binary language. But as a user, are you passing your inputs in the binary language? No, you are not passing your inputs in the binary language. You are passing all your inputs in the human readable format. Okay, but your system could not able to understand this format. This time, in between these two, we required somebody to make the translation. We need someone to make the translation from the human readable format to the system readable format. That translation will happen with the help of your operating system. So your operating system, the very first one why you require the operating system is to make the conversion from the human readable format to the system readable format. Okay, whatever the inputs you are passing in your system, everything it will going to convert it into the system readable format. Then it will send to the hardware for an execution. Once it is executed, again the output also will be generated in the system readable format. Then again your operating system need to convert it into the human readable format, right? So what is the first one? You require the operating system conversion from human readable format to system readable format. The same way system readable format to the human readable format. Okay. This is the first point. And the second one is, as a user, whatever the inputs you are passing, let's say you are passing the input something LinkedIn login. As per the user perspective, this is one site, this is one web application in the backend. But as per your system perspective, everything is a process. Everything is a process because everything is written with a piece of code. Everything is written with the code. If any process wants to start in our system, that process is required the resources. The process is required some percentage of the CPU resource, it's required the memory resource, it's required the storage resource. Depends upon the process, it's kind of LinkedIn like process, it's required the bandwidth as well. Okay, it's required the bandwidth as well. But while you are initiating this process, let's say here you are trying to initiating this process. While you are initiating this process, are you defined any resource? Are you telling to this LinkedIn outcome you can use this percentage of the CPU or this percentage of the memory? No, you are not defining any of the resource, right? At that time, who will going to allocate the resources for this application? Who will going to allocate the resources for this process? Your operating system. Again, your operating system will going to allocate the resources for this process. And also, as a user, you could not give the guarantee how much resource this particular process is required. Okay, you could not give the guarantee. If it is the monolithical application, there you could not set the limit for the resources of your process. If it is the modern applications, like if you're running as your application in the containers, that time we can set some limits. Okay, but if this application is the monolithical application, at that time you could not give the guarantee. And also, as a user, you are the user. You are not going to maintaining this application. You're just utilizing this. Here you cannot define the resources, how much this process is required to start and run in our system. While this process is starting, initially the process is required. Let's try to understand. While you are initializing this process, initially the process is required 20 millicore of the CPU. That resource is sufficient to start. Later sometime, the process is asking for the more resource. The process is asking somewhere around the 100 millicore of the CPU. Based upon the process load, the process can consume the resource. At the same time, after some time, again the process is asking some less resource. It is asking some 50 millicore of the CPU. So every time the process resource allocation will change. Sometimes it's required the more resource, sometimes it's required the less resource. So as a user, you cannot sit and monitor the single process, and you cannot able to allocate and change the resource allocation for the process. So that entire process will be taken by your operating system. Okay, so the operating system will going to allocate the resource and will going to maintain the resources for that process. Whenever it's required the high resource, it will going to allocate. Whenever it is required the low resource, it is going to allocate. What is the second one? Resource allocation for processes. Resource allocation for the process, or you could say usage of underlying hardware plan. These are the two major reasons why we require the operating systems. Clear with this? Do you have any questions? Anyone having any questions on this?
No, sir.
Okay. Next one is Linux. So what is Linux? Linux is an open source operating system. Linux is an open source operating system. So an operating system is a software, same definition. Operating system is a software which directly manages hardware resource in system. Like what are the common hardware resource your system is having? Your system can have the CPU, memory, it can have the storage devices, it can have the NIC card, network interface cards. Right? These are the common hardware resources. So in your Linux, you have the various distributions. You could say these are the distributions, types, and the flavors. In your Windows, you are having the various types, right? The same way in your Linux also, you are having the various distributions. Okay, many times we are trying to referring these are the distributions, but if you want to call it as a types and the flavors also, you can call it. Initially, this Linux was introduced by the Linux Torvalds. Okay, Linux Torvalds. This person is introduced to the Linux in 1991. 1991, this person is introduced to Linux. So when this person is introduced to the Linux to the market in 1991, This person is released the software with the open source license. With the open source license. Okay. With the open source license. Based upon this open source license, many communities formed and many organizations are modified this source code. Whatever the code this person is used to build this Linux, okay, that code they modified and they created their own operating systems. They created their own operating systems. Those this time we are calling these are the distributions. Distributions of Linux. So you have the various distributions of Linux. We have the 500 plus distributions are existed in the market. In that, all the distributions we will try to see some of the well-known distributions which we are using in our day-to-day. The very first one is Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And the second one is the Fedora. Fedora Linux. You can it started. CentOS. We are having a CentOS in the market. We all know these operating system names, right? At least we heard about these names: Red Hat Enterprise Linux, Fedora, CentOS. Somewhere we heard these names. Likewise, you are having the Ubuntu. Sorry, IBM. IBM. IBM is also distribution. No, IBM is not this. Ubuntu. We have the Ubuntu. Okay, we have the SUSE Linux. We have Kali Linux. We have Linux Mint. Okay, we have Linux Mint. We have Amazon Linux. We have Oracle Linux. This Oracle Linux also will be same like your Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Commands and everything is the same. You just named it as Oracle Linux by the Oracle. Okay, Oracle Linux. And Microsoft also having one Linux operating system, but they are not using that operating system officially in their Azure servers or somewhere. They are using that operating system inside their containerized applications in the Azure cloud platform. Okay. If you have the Azure repository, if you have the Azure registry for your to maintain your containerized applications, there you can get this operating system from the Azure. But you don't need to worry, we can use any of the operating systems in the containers. That is our dependency. Likewise, you are having the student Linux. The student Linux is created by the IIT Chennai students in 2022. Okay, so these are the various distributions. Likewise, you are having 500 plus active distributions are existed. 100 plus active operating systems are existed in the market as of today. Okay, as we said, we have these many distributions are existed in the market. In these all the distributions, okay, many people are using some of the distributions. In these all the distributions, specifically, why we want to use this Red Hat Enterprise Linux? Why we want to use this Red Hat Enterprise Linux? And also many organizations, why they are going to using this Red Hat Enterprise Linux? Where it makes the difference between Red Hat Enterprise Linux and the other Linux operating system. So whatever the distributions here we are seeing, these are the distributions. Some of the distributions are developed by the communities. Some of the distributions are developed by the individual persons. Some distributions will be developed by the organizations. Here the Red Hat Enterprise Linux is built by the organization, that is Red Hat. That is Red Hat. Red Hat is one organization which is built by the Red Hat organization. Fedora is built by the Fedora community. You already know the community, right? Community in also some group of people. They are connecting from the for the old. This one also built by the CentOS community. CentOS community. Likewise, Ubuntu is built by the Canonical. Ubuntu SUSE is built by the SUSE. SUSE is built by the SUSE community, right? Amazon is built by the AWS. Oracle Linux is built by the Oracle, right? Likewise, various distributions is built by the organizations, communities, and the individual persons. So in these all the distributions, specifically why we want to use this Linux, let's take one simple example to understand this. Let's say here I have the two PCs. These are the two laptops here I have. These two laptops came from the same brand, HP. This laptop I bought from the official HP store. From the official HP store, I taken this laptop. Same way, here I have the same laptop with the same configurations or with the different configuration. But this laptop I bought from some individual person, from some friend or somebody I bought it. So while I'm working with the system, unfortunately here I'm getting some issues. I'm getting the issues with the software or the GUI or the underlying hardware platform. Here I'm getting some issues. So when we are getting the issue, the very first thing, we're trying to resolve that issue from our side. Okay, even if we don't know what is the system also, at least we'll try to search it in the Google and we will try to resolve that issue. In case if that issue is resolved, that's fine. If it is not resolved, we'll going to contact into the support representative. We'll contact into the support representative. So there they'll provide you the support based upon your warranty. Is it? Based upon your warranty, they will give you the support. If you have the valid warranty, the warranty might be 1 year or 1.5 year, right? So based upon your warranty, they'll give you the support. They'll resolve the issue. Okay. But here, when I'm working with the system, here also I'm getting the same issue. Here I can expect any support. You bought this laptop from some person. Here you can expect any support. There have a possibility, right? Maybe if that person is familiar with us, he can help us. But we could not give the guarantee 100% the issue is resolved. But here, 100% issue is resolved. Do you got this example? Right. The same way, when it comes to the servers, let's say here I have one server. A server is a device like your laptop. The only difference is the server can able to run 24/7. It can listen any of the requests. It can respond to any of the requests. Okay. Server is just a device. So in this server, here I have the two servers. In one server, I am using Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Whatever the version it could be, it doesn't matter. Okay. Here I have the another server. In this server, I am using the another operating system like CentOS. I am using some Fedora. Any of the operating system we can use. Here I have one application. In the servers, what we are using, we are deploying the application. This is the application here I have. Okay, this is the application. Let's say this is one Flipkart application. You can assume it. This one Flipkart web application. Okay, Flipkart web application. In both the servers, I'm running the same application. Both the servers, I'm running the same application. Let's assume this is the big billion days. Simple example. This is the big billion days. Okay, while my customers are accessing this application, there is the heavy traffic is floating on this application. Heavy traffic is floating on that application. So whenever the traffic is floating, the application will start consuming the so much of resources from the underlying code. So much of resources. Okay. At that time, I got the issue with my underlying operating system. Maybe my operating system is not properly responding, or my terminal is stuck, or some commands are not working as expected. Some programs are not working as expected. Whatever the reason it could be, I'm getting some issues with my underlying operating system. Or whatever the libraries and the dependencies I used to build my application, those libraries and the dependencies are not supporting in my operating system. Like that, different kinds of issue we can get with the operating systems. Here I'm using the Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Generally, if you want to use the Red Hat Enterprise Linux, we need the subscription. We need the subscription. Okay, when you have the subscription, depends upon your subscription plan, Red Hat will give you the support. You could not give the guarantee Red Hat will support it 24/7. That could be depends upon your subscription plan. Here the Red Hat is having the two types of subscription plan. That could be depends upon the product. Understand that Red Hat is having the various product, depends upon the product. The subscription plans also will change. If you are going with the Red Hat Enterprise Linux, we can get the two types of subscription. One is the standard and the premium. If you go with the OpenShift like products, there the warranty plans are completely different. Okay, or if you go with the private cloud like OpenStack, there the warranty plans are completely different. So depends upon the product, the subscription will change. Subscription plans will change. Budget also will change. So here the Red Hat is having the two types of subscription plans. One is the standard. Okay, the standard, it's a 8x5 support. It's a 8x5 support, how we could say. 8 hours. Okay, 8 hours per day. 5 days a week. 5 days a week. And the second one is the premium. If you go with the premium, here the Red Hat will support you 24/7. Okay, 24/7 they will support. So whenever you raise the ticket to the Red Hat, okay, Red Hat, we are getting this kind of issue with your operating system. I have the valid subscription. You need to check. Okay, let's say the customer is having the standard subscription. Okay, so the person who is contacted, the support representative who is communicating with you from the Red Hat, let's say the person is working in the shift 8-hour shift. Understand that. I will tell you the why these subscription plans are important. Sometimes these subscription plans will play the key role in your environment. I will tell you one of the incident also. Let's say the person is working in the 8-hour shift. That person's shift will going to end at 5 p.m. You are getting one issue. You raise the ticket to the Red Hat. That person will come to the call. Okay, immediately they will come to the call within 10 minutes or SL based upon SL. That person is come to the call at 4:30. 4:30. 4:30, you all are in the bridge. The call is going. Now the time is 5. Your issue is not resolved, but that support representative will leave your call. He won't care about your issue. Exactly 5, he'll wind up the call. He won't care about your issue. Because in the Red Hat, they have this standard policy. Every employee should work only 8 hours. So that's the reason they will leave. Whether you have the subscription or not, it doesn't matter. That's why they are asking to refer the premium. They're referring the premium. When you go with the premium, here they will give the 24/7 support. If that person's shift is going to end at the 5 p.m., in 5:1 and the 5:2, next person will join in the call. Immediately. Next representative will going to join in the call. So that's the reason subscription plans are is crucial. Okay. And also that too depends upon the product. If you are using the Red Hat Enterprise Linux, this will be supported by the technical team. Red Hat backend technical team will support your product, Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Or if you are going with the OpenShift, if you are going with the OpenShift product, Red Hat SRE team will support. Red Hat Site Reliability Engineering team will support that product. Okay. So these are the subscription plans from the Red Hat. So what is the advantage here? Here we'll get the support. Here we'll get the support depends upon our subscription plan. And also, as the administrator in your day-to-day activities, you want to install various softwares in your system or you want to uninstall. Okay. If you want to install any of the softwares, those we can call it as the packages here. You will understand later what is a package. Okay. We are calling these are the packages. So in your system, whatever the packages we are trying to install in your Linux systems, whatever the packages we are trying to install, those all the packages are came from the repository. Came from the repositories. Here, I'm taking a subscription from the Red Hat. So Red Hat will provide you the repositories. Whatever the repositories here the Red Hat is providing, whatever the packages they are including inside these repositories, those all packages are textured packages. Okay, these all packages textured and non-vulnerable packages. Okay, that is the another advantage. You can get all the textured packages from the Red Hat, all the supported packages. Or if you go with the community, if you go with the community-based operating system, here also you will get the pre-repositories. But here you could not give the guarantee the package might be support to your system. And also, while you're using the system, if you're getting any issue, the community is having the groups. There you can drop your queries, but you could not expect the immediate support. Maybe you can expect the support in a day, in a week, in a month. Because there are some group of people, they just build this operating system and they leave it in the market to free for everyone. But this is a product from the organization you want to use, you must have the valid subscription plans. Valid subscription plans. Okay. So that is the difference. Not only this operating system, whatever the products we are using, let's say you have the server from the Dell, you have the hardware from the Cisco. So whatever the products we are using in the production environment, most of the things, every time we are looking for the subscriptions, even for your hardware as well. You are using the hardware from the VMware. You must looking for the subscription. Because we don't want to down our application due to some small reasons. If it is a big billion days, traffic is heavily eating on my application. Per day, at least 10,000 customers can able to visit my application. Due to some reason, my application is down. I will lose the 10,000 users, right? I will lose the 10,000 users. Like that, if it is happened 2 days or 3 days, they can close the business. They will not close the business except, right? If it is a small scale organizations, definitely those will happen. Okay, so that whatever the products you are using, whatever the infrastructure or whatever the softwares you are using in your production environment, There we are expecting the support. Clear with this? And the second one is Fedora. So Fedora is developed by the Fedora community. But whatever the source code they used to build this Fedora, that was sponsored by the Red Hat. That was sponsored by the Red Hat. So that whatever the commands you are using in the Red Hat, the same you can use inside your Fedora as well. Okay, commands and everything is the same. 80% Fedora, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, commands and everything is the same. But here, why the Red Hat is sponsored to the Fedora? Why the Red Hat is sponsored to the Fedora? Let's say currently the Red Hat Enterprise Linux is running with the version 9.0. As per this Linux Server promise, this person made one promise to the market: every 3 years will release the new distribution of the Linux operating system. As per this person promise, every Linux distribution, whether it could be the Red Hat or it could be the Ubuntu, any Linux distribution, okay, need to release one new version of the operating system in every 3 years. Every 3 years, it want to release the new distribution of Linux operating system. As per that, currently it is running with the version 9.0. In next 3 years, okay, they want to change their version to the 10.0. When the version is changing, the customers are the existing customers or the new customers are expecting some features, right? They are expecting some better GUI, better library support, okay, better hardware support, or the container runtime support. Whatever the support, sorry, whatever the future it could be, the customers are expecting some features. So what are the features they are trying to implement in their upcoming version? Before they are going to implement in their new version, first they want to test. Instead of directly implementing those changes in their official Red Hat Enterprise Linux, first they want to test whether these are working successfully or not. So that testing the Red Hat is going to do inside the Fedora. Whatever the features they are testing for their upcoming version, those are all the features Red Hat will test inside the Fedora. Once the testers are successful, then only they are going to implement into the runtime Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Okay, runtime Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So that's the reason Red Hat is supporting the Fedora. Not only the Fedora, Red Hat is the most largest contributor in the world. Okay, largest contributor in the world. Red Hat will support the many open source community. I will tell you some of the communities. What are the communities Red Hat will support? Let's say initially this Linux was supported by the created by the Linux server. Later Red Hat Enterprise Linux is formed. So here the Red Hat is supported this Linux community. Red Hat is supporting this Linux community. And the Ansible. Initially Ansible was built by the ex-Red Hatter. The person who is working with the Red Hat, that person is introduced to this Ansible. Later the Ansible community is formed. From there onwards, Ansible community started supporting this Ansible. Okay. At the same time, different organizations will support these communities. In that, Red Hat is the one of the organization, but it is the largest contributor. The reason is this is the open source product. On top of this open source product, Red Hat will going to create one platform. Red Hat going to create the platform. They call it as a product, and they are selling it in the market. This time, on top of the Ansible, Red Hat is created the platform that is AAP, Ansible Automation Platform. Whatever the features we are not having, we cannot use inside this open source tools. Those we can get from this product. Likewise, Kubernetes. Initially, Kubernetes was built by the Google. It is the Google internal project. They named it as the Kubernetes in 2015. They donated to the CNCF. Okay. This time, on top of this Kubernetes, Red Hat is created one platform that is the OpenShift. This is one container orchestration platform. Kubernetes is a container orchestration project, came from the CNCF. OpenShift is a enterprise Kubernetes product from the Red Hat. Enterprise Kubernetes product from OpenShift, just a name of the product. But the actual thing is enterprise Kubernetes. Likewise, OpenStack. Initially, OpenStack was built by the OpenStack community in the USA. Later, Red Hat is created the platform on top of this OpenStack. And they named it as the Red Hat OpenStack Private Cloud. And they are selling that product. Okay, they are selling that product. Likewise, whatever the open source project you are having in the market, on top of the every open source project, Red Hat is having their mark with the product. That's how the Red Hat is running. Clear with this? That's the reason Red Hat is supporting the many open source communities. Many open source communities. They are going to support the GitOps community. They are going to support the Spinnaker community. Okay. Different communities Red Hat will support. The reason is on top of those, they are creating their own products. That's the reason.
Fedora is treated as a lab
Treated as a
for any update features. They will test on that. Right?
sorry,
Fedora.
Fedora.
Uh, it is just as a software. Any updates you can give on Fedora. After they are going to give the users that software.
How they are going to give the users? No, they are going to text it first in the Fedora. Later, they are implementing into the Red Hat Enterprise Linux. They are just testing in the Fedora whether those features are working or not. Sorry.
It's like a test lab.
Text in environment. Because directly they cannot make the change in the official version, right? Many customers are using. Maybe it could be impacted on the any customer application. Any customer application could be impacted. So directly we cannot make the change on the runtime cases. You got it? Likewise, CentOS also built by the CentOS community. But in 2014, CentOS joined with the Red Hat. Okay. 2014, CentOS joined with the Red Hat. From there onwards, Red Hat is supporting the CentOS. But from 2021, Red Hat withdraw the support to the CentOS. Okay, from the 2021 December onwards, Red Hat is not supporting the CentOS. But still, CentOS, Fedora, Red Hat, and Linux, these three distributions, commands, everything is the same. But there is a lot of differences between these three. Okay, lot of differences between these three. If you are using the Red Hat and Linux example, Red Hat and Linux will support the Python platform 3.9. CentOS version 9 will not support. CentOS version 9 will not support. Like the some of the differences is there. And what are the packages here you are getting? Those packages are came from the CentOS community. But here, what are the packages you are getting? Those packages are came from the Red Hat. Or from the Red Hat. Right? Clear with the distributions. Likewise, these all the distributions are built by the communities and the different persons and the organizations. Clear with this distributions. Next one is open source. Next one is open source. Let's take one simple example. Let's say I'm building one new product. I'm building one new product. So once I built that product, I decided to release that product into the market. But while I'm releasing that product into the market, what I did, I released that product with the open source license. It means I'm giving the authority to all the persons. Okay, this is the product I'm releasing into the market. If you want, you can make the modifications in this product. Okay, you can make the modifications. Once you made the modifications, if you want to sell that product to the anyone, you can sell. Or if you want to free to distribute to the anyone, you can do. Anyone, you can do. This is the statement I made when I'm releasing that product to the market. But here I have one condition. The condition is whatever the modifications you are doing on that product, every modification should be comes to my guidelines. I will give you some guidelines. You should make the modifications only under the guidelines. Okay. If you cross that like guidelines, you will come to the violation. Then I can able to take any of the action on you. That is the statement I made. The same way, whenever this Linux server is releasing this Linux into the market, he released that Linux with the open source license. He released that Linux with the open source license. So any user can modify. Any user can create the new Linux distribution. Once they create it, they want to sell it, they can create it to distribute to the anyone. Okay. But whatever the modifications they are trying to do, all the modifications should be comes to the guidelines. So no one will cross the guidelines. Right. So likewise, whatever the Linux distributions you are having in the market, you could not modify all the Linux distributions. Understand that. Linux is an open source initially. Initially, it is an open source. It doesn't mean you can modify all the Linux distributions. Even you cannot see the source code what Red Hat is used to build this Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Red Hat won't allow you to modify the Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Likewise, whatever the other distributions which you are having in the market, some of the distributions we can modify, some of the distributions we cannot able to modify. Whatever the distributions we can modify, before you going to make the modifications, first you need to check the documentation of the community. Community is having the documentation that we can read from that specific community page. Okay, you should read the guidelines first. If you are a good developer, if you are good in the C++ languages, you can read the documentation and you can make the modification based on that. Apart from that, if you made any modifications, whatever you want, the community will own tax. Community will own tax, right? That is the open source. But how exactly this Linux works? Okay, how exactly this Linux works? Let's see the architecture of Linux. This is my system hardware. When you install the operating system, what will happen? On top of the hardware, you're going to create the kernel. You are having the kernel on top of the hardware. On top of the kernel, we are having shell. We are having shell. Okay, we are having the shell. This time, here you have one administrator. This is the administrator here we have. This administrator wants to communicate with this system. This administrator wants to control his system. How this administrator can able to communicate and control his system? Okay, how this administrator can able to control and communicate with the system. If you want to communicate, it means if you want to use any other system, there are the two ways. One is the GUI, graphical user interface, whatever you are using in your Windows operating system or in your mobile devices in your day-to-day activities. That is the graphical user interface. Simply with help of the mouse, with the help of the clicks, you can able to control your entire system. Okay, graphical user interface. Graphical user interface. And the second one is the command line interface. Command line interface. As you know, in the GUI, with the help of the clicks, we can control our system. But when it comes to the CLI, if you want to control your system, here we need to pass some small programs. Here we need to pass some small programs. Those programs we can call it as commands. Any of the operating system, Windows, Mac, anything. Those small programs we can call it as a commands. When you install this operating system, these program files come inbuilt with that operating system. We no need to build our custom code files. Okay, we no need to build our custom files. Those we can call it as the commands. But from where we can pass these commands? Where we can pass these commands? Here, if the user wants to pass these commands, here the user is required the interface. Here the user is required the interface. That interface will be provided by the hardware component called terminal. Terminal is an hardware component which will provide you the interface for the users to pass the programs. Okay, it is one hardware. Right, this is the hardware. Now this time, whatever the commands the user is having, every command the user is passing from the terminal. Okay, once the user is passed that commands from the terminal, first that will be read by the shell. Let's say here the user is passing the simple command ls. This is the very simple command in your Linux operating system. Here the user is passed this command. Whenever the input is coming from the user in this terminal, first that input will be read by the shell. Here your shell is an interpreter. Shell is an interpreter. It is an interface between the user and the kernel. It's an interface between the user and the kernel. Whatever the inputs coming from the user, the shell will going to read that inputs, and it will convert that inputs into the system readable format. Convert that inputs into the system readable format. Once it is converted that input into the system readable format, this time shell will going to pass that inputs to the kernel. Pass that inputs to the kernel. Here, your kernel we can refer it as an heart of the operating system. Many people will refer this kernel is an heart of the operating system. Actually, this kernel is one image. While your system is booting, the kernel will going to load into the memory. Here, the kernel is responsible to maintain the hardware platform. Whatever the input which is coming from the shell, your kernel treat those inputs as a process. Everything is a process. From here onwards, it is a process. If any process wants to start, the process requires the resources. The kernel will going to allocate the resources for that process. It will going to allocate the CPU resource, memory resource, and the storage resource. Once it is allocated the resources, then it is going to send that process to the hardware for an execution. Once it is executed, kernel will take that from the hardware and it will forward that output to the shell. This time, your shell again responsible to convert that output into the system readable format to human readable format, and it is going to display the output into the same terminal. From wherever it is taken the input in the same location, it is going to send the output. Okay, send the output. This is how the commands in your system will execute, whatever the operating system. Clear with this architecture of Linux. This is your Linux architecture. As we said, this is the program file, right? So this program file will be stored somewhere else in your system. Your shell will be finding that file, and it will send the entire input to the kernel. Okay, the entire input it will send to the kernel. Then the kernel will going to allocate the resource for that process. Then it will send to the hardware. Once it is executed, it will take it from the hardware, forward it to the shell. Then the shell will going to convert it to the human readable format, display it on your terminal. Clear with this? This is your Linux architecture. If you have any questions after this, you can let me know. And where we are using these operating systems, in your Windows operating system, you are using in your desktops, laptops. But Linux operating system, where you are using? The Linux operating system, mostly 90% the Linux operating systems we are using in the servers. We are using in the servers. What is server here? It's a device. It's kind of your laptop with the high configurations. Let's say the developer is building one application. Whenever the developer is building the application, it means he's writing the code related to that application. When he's writing the code, he's writing that code within his system. Within his system, he's writing the code. Now the code build process is done. Now the application is ready. Once the application is ready, this time we need to deploy that application. We need to install that application somewhere. In case if I try to deploy that application in my laptop, let's say the application is required somewhere around 60 GB of memory. It's required 2 TB of storage, or it's required the 8 core of CPU. Will your laptop can able to provide that much of resource? Will your laptop can able to provide? No, it cannot able to provide. And also it's possible to run your laptops 24/7. It's possible. If 100 traffic is coming over the internet, will your laptop can able to handle? It can able to respond? No. There are the different conflicts. You cannot able to deploy your applications within your desktop or the laptops. That's where we are using the servers. It's a device with the high configurations. Okay. So in the servers, you are deploying your applications, and that servers will listen to the user requests and respond to the user requests. Okay, we can you can take the servers from the anywhere. You can buy your own infrastructure. You can take it as the rent, right? You can take it as a rent. However you want, you can take nowadays. Earlier, we need to buy the infrastructure. In the 1990s, earlier days, you need to buy your own infrastructure. If you want to start the new organization, or if you want to host your new application, you need to buy the infrastructure. In the room, you need to have the server. But this time, you don't require. You can simply take it as a rent from any cloud provider, AWS, GCP, Azure, Alibaba. From the VMware, wherever you want, you can take the rent. How much time you want, you can utilize, and you can pay that much, and you can leave it. Different possibilities, right? And also, while you are deploying your application, every application is built with the libraries and the dependencies. Every application is having some libraries and dependencies. Here, the developer is using some kind of libraries and the dependencies. As an administrator, while you are deploying that application, you should require the same libraries and the dependencies within your system. Within your server, you require the same libraries and the dependencies. Okay, Windows will not support all the program libraries and the dependencies. Windows will not support. But when it comes to the Linux, Linux will support. Okay, Linux will support all the programming languages. Okay, it will support all the programming languages. That is another reason why we want to use Linux mostly in our runtime environments, in our applications. Clear with this? So far, it's clear, guys. In online. Okay.
Clear, clear.
Okay, let's see here. We have some slides. We'll see that what we are having in this. So far, we understood what is an operating system, what is Linux and the history of Linux, types of distributions, Linux architecture, and the open source. So we already know what is an operating system, right? So this person is introduced to the Linux server. Okay, let's discuss in detail about the distributions. First one is Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Red Hat is an American multinational software organization, provides open source software products to enterprise community. Open source software products to enterprise community. Red Hat was founded in 1993. Red Hat has its corporate headquarters in North Carolina, USA. Okay, this is the address of the Red Hat. Red Hat Enterprise Linux is a distribution developed by the Red Hat and targeted towards the commercial market. So it will be for the commercial purpose, not for the free to use. Instead of calling the Red Hat Enterprise Linux, we can simply call it as RHCSA. Red Hat Enterprise Linux will support the server version and the desktop version. Both it will support x86 64-bit. It will not support the 32-bit architecture. Red Hat uses the strict trademark rules to free redistribution of their officially supported version. I will tell you the meaning of this. Let's say let's say you buy one license from the Red Hat for your operating system or any of the product. You buy one license. You cannot use the same license for the another application. For one server, you buy one subscription. You cannot use the same subscription for the other server. For the other server, you must register. Okay. For the other server, you must register. Single license, only single person or the organization can use. Single license cannot use the multiple persons, not like the Netflix. Understand that? It's not like the Netflix subscription. We cannot use the 5 people or the 4 people with a single license. Overview of RHCL. Red Hat Enterprise Linux 9 source code is the pillow. This is the source code name. Current kernel version is 5.14. GCC version is 8.2. GCC means GNU Code Compiler. This feature is mainly for the developers to text their C++ programmings, compile their C++ programming languages. Systemd version is 249. Systemd means this is the first process which is started in your Red Hat Enterprise Linux. We have the dedicated session on the Systemd. There you will understand more about this. Red Hat Enterprise Linux version 9 officially released on 17th May 2022. CentOS means Community Enterprise Operating System. It is a Linux distribution that provides a free community support. Here also, as we said, we can get the support, but that is the community support. You could not give the guarantee the support will be on time. Yes. In January 2014, CentOS officially joined with the Red Hat. Next one is Fedora. Fedora is a Linux distribution developed by the Fedora community, Fedora project, and sponsored by the Red Hat. Fedora is the upstream source of commercial Red Hat Enterprise Linux distribution. Okay, commercial Red Hat Enterprise Linux distribution. This is the architecture of Linux. So we already know what is an application. You can see shell. What is the shell here? The shell is a Linux command line interpreter. It provides an interface between the user and the kernel and executes the program calls commands. What is the kernel here? Kernel is a free open source monolithic modular. It is the main component of the Linux operating system and is the core interface between the computer hardware and its process. Not only in the Linux, in your Windows, Android, everywhere you are having the kernels. Okay. But there is a difference. All the kernels are not the same. Let's take the simple example. I think you all know the BBC, right? Not BBC, BCC. 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 BBC. Not the news group. We have the 100 mobiles, OnePlus, Oppo. These all are coming from the only one brand. BCC or BBC, the name I forgot it. These all are coming from the one brand. What they did? Initially, there is the 100 that is initially released by the Google. Android is an open source. Android is an open source operating system. It came from the Google initially. So while they are releasing, they made it with the open source. What that BCC did, BCC or BCC, BBK Electronics, yes, BBK Electronics. What they did, They modified that open source. Okay, they modified this Linux kernel code and they created the various distributions. That's why we are seeing the various differences between the OnePlus or other versions in the OnePlus or some the Oppo. Okay, but these all are came from the only single company, that is the BB Electronics. But they made the difference. How they made? They modified this kernel. Your mobile device also you are having the kernels. They modified this kernel and they made the change. That is the market strategy. And finally, what is an open source? Linux is a free open source operating system released under the GNU General Public License. It's also become the largest open source software project in the world. Linux is the world most largest open source project. Many people will going to modify the existing Linux distributions and creating and releasing the new Linux distributions. Okay. Linux is released under an open source license, which prevents the restriction on the usage of the software. Anyone can run, study, modify, and redistribute the source code, or even sell the copies of the modified code under the same license. Finally, stats. Linux is the third most popular desktop OS. The world top 500 fastest supercomputers all running on the Linux. 96% of the 1 million web servers are running on the Linux. There are total 600 plus active distributions are existed in the market as of today. This is all about your Linux. In that, your Red Hat Enterprise Linux is one of the distribution, mainly which you are using for the commercial purpose. Okay, that's about the demo.